Though I didn't experience what Vietnam vets experienced, because thankfully people have responded so much better to welcoming the troops home from my generation of war from Iraq and Afghanistan. When I came home, I had a very difficult time adjusting back home. And I had some friends that they weren't present for me in those moments. And so I struggled for many years with my own PTSD, my own pain, my own nightmares. And so I relate to the struggle of Vietnam vets because it's really powerful when someone can tell you, welcome home.
A young Air Force veteran greets a grizzled combat vet in a coffee shop. She thanks him for his service and, in so doing, unleashes his memories of Vietnam, even a touch of madness. And these, in turn, guide her to a path through her own pain.
Just like many of my friends and myself, we worked in the intel world in a variety of different fields, whether it was drones or counter intel, all kinds of different things that we looked at. Those things take a toll, and we're just human. And depending on, who we are and how we process things, some of us just didn't make it.
And even after her fighting is done, once she's home and safe, the losses among Shani's warrior friends continue during what she and others who shared her experiences call the suicide season. Hello. Welcome to the Mighty Pen Podcast. I'm David L. Robbins, your host and founder of the Mighty Pen Project, a free writing program for veterans and their families, in partnership with the Virginia War Memorial Foundation here in Richmond, Virginia. Shani Miller served in the U.S. Air Force, deploying as an intel specialist to Iraq and Afghanistan. In our first story, War's Teeth, Shani describes how an encounter with a Vietnam veteran in a cafe released for them both a cascade of memory that, though hard, became a blessing. Then in Shani's second story, November 8, 2016, she describes in heartbreaking prose the precipice so many returning veterans stand at, the choice between living with the recollections of war or seeking peace in the chasm of suicide. First, let's hear Laine Satterfield's powerful rendition of Shani Miller's short story, War's Teeth. Then Shani and I will talk about the faith she found in family, God, and a coffee shop.
It's Saturday morning, and the Starbucks at the grocery store buzzes with commotion. Two homeless guys bicker in the corner while another man talks loudly on his phone. The cafe smells like roasted coffee beans and fried chicken from the nearby deli. Our three kids sit around the table with bagels and chocolate milk, and my husband Nathaniel hands me an Americano with steamed heavy cream. It's piping hot, just the way I like. This is our Saturday morning tradition, snacks before grocery shopping. Cassandra and Elijah cheer their milk together and wash down bites of bagels. Baby Hadassah kicks her feet in the high chair while playing with goldfish. Relaxing in the wooden chair, I sip my coffee and smile at Nathaniel. I know I only have moments before I'll be wiping up spilled milk or taking a child to the bathroom. It's going to be hot today. Make sure you wear sunscreen, a man announces as he comes around the corner. Others in the coffee shop ignore him. The Veterans Affairs Hospital is 15 minutes from here, and locals are accustomed to disturbances from homeless veterans. Thanks, I say, looking him in the eyes. At first, I think this man is homeless, but he's dressed in a buttoned-up shirt with khakis. His boots glisten, and he wears a black cap with golden letters, Vietnam Vet. Setting his walker at a nearby table, he sits with a newspaper. Cassandra, I tell my 5-year-old daughter, go tell him thank you for your service. Why, Mommy? Cassandra blushes as she hides behind my 3-year-old son, Elijah. Do you remember when we talked about Mommy going to Iraq and Afghanistan? This man fought for our country in Vietnam. Cassandra twirls her long, dirty blonde hair and glances at the man reading his newspaper. Short and thin, she leans into her sturdy brother and giggles. Working up some courage, she gently says, Thank you for your service, mister. He continues reading his paper. A little louder, I coach Cassandra. Thank you for your service, she mutters, but he doesn't hear her. Baby Hadassah throws her goldfish on the ground, and Elijah spills his milk on the table. Cassandra and Elijah tickle each other, and more milk spills. The moment has passed. Nathaniel grabs some napkins, and I scoop Hadassah into the shopping cart. Before I leave Starbucks, I ask Nathaniel if I can catch up with him and the kids in a minute. Excuse me, sir. I just wanted to say thank you for your service. He puts down his newspaper, pushes his shoulders back, and reaches to shake my hand. His fingers are calloused, and his grip is tight. The palm of his hand feels warm, but the bones in his fingers are cold, like the eeriness of war. In his eyes, I see pain. He mutters something about the newspaper. I can't quite understand what he's saying. You can't trust anyone, he rattles. Not the government, not your pastor, not your family. Don't even trust your husband. I listen intently to his every word, not breaking eye contact. I'd been on my own search to understand the Vietnam War for years. What was it like in the jungle? What was it like to return home? My own transition home from Afghanistan in 2016 held its own nightmares. I'd returned to friends who knew nothing about the horrors of the Taliban. Chanting propaganda music and violent images plagued me, and comrades' deaths lingered. PTSD, loneliness, and grief led to my own suicide ideations. Just like this Vietnam vet, I had lost trust. I had cried out for help, but my friends weren't there. They abandoned me. When the bloody nightmares intensified and my body racked with the horrors of war, I suffered alone. The Gulf of Tonkin, this man says, insisting I research the incident. War still fills his eyes. It was all a farce, he rattles. The Viet Cong had bamboo rafts. It was all a farce. I try to ask a question, but he keeps going. The leaders were screwing those Vietnam girls. The veins in his arms bulge. He bangs his fist on the table. Memories of shenanigans from Afghanistan return. We hooked you up with the operation, now you owe me sex. A leader's words still throb through me. War brings out the worst in people. There was that day in the shower. The gentleman in the coffee shop brings me back to the present. His words are desperate, like the sound of a little boy crying for help. I want to lean over and hold him, but I'm afraid I'll scare him. His body is reliving Vietnam. We all stood naked, naked in the shower, vulnerable as hell. He choked up. Moments pass. War reflects off his eyes. We heard the whistling of the bombs, but we had nowhere to go. We fell to the ground and covered our heads. There was nowhere to go. We were naked. I grab his hand. He weeps. I weep. He is stiff. His feet touch the ground of this grungy Starbucks in Virginia, but he's still in Vietnam. Bloodied body parts flew. We had nowhere to go. Me and Johnny ran in the open field. It was the only way to get to the bunker. Feel the sticky stench of his words. He grabs my hand tighter as the earth shakes, metal thrashes, and I feel the wide open nakedness of the field. Our stories intermingle as my body remembers the rattling of my containerized housing unit in Afghanistan. Incoming, 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 I hear reverberating in my eardrums. I drop to the cool floor, shoving my helmet over my head. Boom, boom, boom. Then silence. I wait for the all clear. God pulled me out of the enemy's teeth like a shark, this Vietnam vet tells me. Chills run down my spine. Amen. Every part of him shakes, but our eyes lock. His words are true to the depth of my soul. My body still remembers booming metal from Taliban mortars and screeching sounds of ISIS propaganda music. I feel the lustful gaze of U.S. soldiers and the agony of friends' suicides. Nightmares still haunt me. I survived. War's teeth had tried to crush me, but just like this veteran, I am still alive. He leans closer. Jesus loves the shit out of you. I sob from my chest. That's the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. Don't trust anybody but Jesus. He loves the shit out of you. Wiping my eyes, I see the tears on his cheeks. What's your name, sir? Ed Brown. He snaps his shoulders to the position of attention. Corporal Ed Brown. Nice to meet you, Corporal Brown. I'm Shani. It's very nice to meet you too, Shani. Your children are beautiful. Thank you. We both stare out of the window, watching shoppers load groceries into their cars. I search my purse to hand him some Kleenex. I pray quietly, thank you for Ed, dear God. I may not have experienced Vietnam like Ed, but some things about war are the same. Ed had endured the jungle. I had endured the desert. He fought the Viet Cong. I fought the Taliban and ISIS. We both lost comrades to enemies in combat and to the demons of the soul. Returning home felt like hell for both of us. Scars on our hearts remained, but we survived the teeth of war.
That was War's Teeth, read movingly by Laine Satterfield. I have the author here with me in the studio, Shani Miller. Shani, that story has so many layers to it. It has the story of Corporal Ed Brown and all of Vietnam. It has the story of Shani Miller and so much of a woman's experience in the military and in combat and in the context of being a female in what has just been for thousands of years a man's domain, right? There you are. But I want to start with what seems to be the heart of that story is the moment you sent your daughter to say, thank you for your service. And my first question is sitting at a Starbucks, having your family around you. Now, you've seen Vietnam vets, you've seen vets. What moves you about this guy to send your daughter to say thank you for your service?
I think our family, we have vets around our house, around our neighborhood all the time. And so this is a practice for our family that I want my kids to be able to say thank you to the vets that have served our country. And even at a young age, we tried, at a kid level, at a 5-year-old level, what we can to teach what it means to serve our country and to go to war.
That's really beautiful and brave to prepare your children for that conversation. They're very young right now, but one day they'll be citizens and might be called themselves, God forbid. But at such a young age, to be made comfortable with the notion of service and to appreciate the people who answer that call. That's a lovely instinct. Okay, so that tells me why your daughter went over and said what she did. Why do you think he did not answer her?
I think he honestly just did not hear her in the moment. He was very focused. He had his newspaper open. He was taking in all of the horrible news of the day, and he just didn't hear her. He was in his moment.
Okay. And then you walked out and you said, thank you for your service. And the story takes you into a reverie
Hmm.
about what you know to have been the quality of his return from war. And it sends you into a reverie about your own return. Can you tell us a little more about that?
I think I've always just had this huge respect for Vietnam vets. And there's been this search in my own life, visiting museums and things and talking to Vietnam vets, visiting Vietnam myself. I think the big pain that I feel, this empathy for Vietnam vets, is that they weren't welcomed home. And that has gripped my heart for so many years, just feeling the pain. And I think though I didn't experience what Vietnam vets experienced, because thankfully people have responded so much better to welcoming the troops home from my generation of war from Iraq and Afghanistan. I think when I came home, I had a very difficult time adjusting back home. And I had some friends that just they weren't present for me in those moments. And so I struggled for many years with my own PTSD, my own pain, my own nightmares. And so I relate to the struggle of Vietnam vets because it's really powerful when someone can tell you, welcome home. Even for myself, there was an experience where I went in to get some help at one point, probably 4 years after I had returned from Afghanistan, which was one of my worst deployments. It was kind of a prayer counseling session that I went to, and the lady inside paused in this moment where I was describing nightmares and violence that I experienced, and she said, "Welcome home." And I broke down in tears, and something changed in that moment. I remember walking out of that counseling session. It was a fall day in Virginia, and I could see color again. Like, I heard kids laughing again. For me, that was a life-changing point. And so when I know that Vietnam vets struggle with not being welcomed home, that's something I feel very deeply.
In the story, he looks at you, you look at him, and you use this phrase, war fills his eyes.
Mm,
Hearing what you just said, do you think he saw the same perhaps in yours?
I think so. I think that there were moments in that coffee shop where we could relate to each other in ways that just didn't have words.
Yeah. When you asked him his name, he said Corporal Ed Brown, and you said Shani Miller. He seemed to regain himself a bit.
Mm,
According to the way you reported in that story, he was quietly ranting a bit. Don't trust the government. Don't trust even your husband. Don't trust anyone. And those sound slightly detached statements. But then when you started talking about war, his war, and you were internalizing all that, he took you to these memories of running naked from a shower during a bombardment. And that sent you into your own reveries of what you experienced. And I don't want to probe too deeply here, but this notion of you being angry at the Taliban and ISIS, understandably, but also being angry at American soldiers.
mm.
Share what details you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I think overall my experience in the military has been such a positive working in the Air Force. My deployment to Afghanistan was a big exception to that. I experienced, quid pro quo sexual harassment where a guy said, "Hey, we hooked you up with this. Now you owe me sex." Like he said that to me, It was a very hard environment. I was the only Air Force person. I was the only female on my base. I did not feel safe. There were comments made to me constantly. I look back now and wonder why I didn't report it, things like that. But I think the biggest thing that was in my head at the moment was I want to be faithful to the mission. I want to complete the mission. And unfortunately, I had to endure what I did, but I'm thankful that nothing worse happened to me at the time.
Can you quickly just fill in what that deployment was, what your duties were?
So I worked counterintelligence. So my job basically was searching through videos and documents of just violence all day long, drone world, that kind of realm.
Mm. Back to the story. You take his hand, he squeezes yours, and through that shared touch, you can tell he's, in your words, still in Vietnam. And concomitantly, you were transported right back to Afghanistan. I loved how you used Corporal Ed Brown not only as a touchstone for your own reportage on your war, but you honored his as well. It's your story. But you saved such honor and you saved so many perfect moments for head. And they almost take the forefront of the story, which is lovely and generous of you, because a lot of other writers would have said, oh, this made me remember this made me remember that. Yet you left the spotlight of that story significantly on Ed Brown. And I think the spear point of the story, when it comes to a head, is he says, Jesus loves the shit out of you, which, Shani, is this wonderful moment of somewhat madness and beauty and insight, cycling back around the madness, underscored by kindness. And all of that touched you. So tell me why you said that was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to you.
I think my own experience, I survived because of Jesus over there. And so to have that coming from a Vietnam veteran who I have the utmost respect for, to say those words to me was like heaven coming down to earth through a language that was my language. I think now that I've been out of the military for so long, when you're around people talking about war, there's not a rawness for people that are outside of the military. But for people that are inside the military, cussing is like it's like it's like a language that speaks to my heart, you know? And so for him to say Jesus loves the shit out of you, it spoke my language to my heart, you know? Oh, I don't know how to
It
describe it,
pushed all
but
the buttons. It
it
had
did.
Jesus, it had shit. Right?
Yeah, it's like it's just, yeah, just a rawness and a realness to it. When you're going through hell in the military, whether you're with comrades or you're by yourself like I was in Afghanistan, you know, when you're in the thick of this mess, there's words, just PG words don't cut it, you know? And so I think his words captured the love of my God through the mess of the violence.
Oh, that's a great mic drop. Now let's listen to our second story, November 8, 2016, also read by Laine Satterfield. Afterward, I'll sit down with author and warrior, Shani Miller.
Outside the four walls of this chapel, voters wait in line to cast their ballots. Citizens hold their breath. Elsewhere, every eye is glued to television screens. The world waits for the rippling consequences of today's election. Will Hillary's lies deceive the world, or Trump's narcissism set our nation on a hill of self-glorification? Gazing at the stained-glass windows of this small chapel in Auburn, California, I breathe deeply. Clamoring voices and heated debates remain outside the vaulted wooden ceiling. Inside, gentle piano notes play. Warm lights shine from chandeliers. This is the first time since being home from Iraq in the past 2 months that I've felt rest. The bloody Battle of Mosul rages, and I pray God will protect Mustafa and Abbas as they fly their helicopters over ISIS-occupied ground. As an air advisor, I supported these men in defeating ISIS in Fallujah and Q West. Now, all I can do is pray for their victory. Leaning my face into my knees, the creaking pews remind me of the small chapel in Iraq, and for a moment, I feel home. Sacredness remains in this somber space. Flashbacks and nightmares from Iraq and Afghanistan have haunted me, but the cascading light shields me from the darkness of my soul. I don't want to leave this place. Beyond these walls, voices rage in a world unknown to me. I can't believe I'll be out of the Air Force in 2 months. I know it's time, but everything just spins. The pastor announces, "Please stand with me for a moment of silence." Behind the pastor, Ben's face appears still on the projected screen. He wears service dress blues with a large ribbon rack. His face is serious, with his eyes locked at attention. I can't believe he's dead. 100 questions rush through my mind. What tormented him? Was he working with drones or part of the kill chain? Were he and his wife struggling? Did nightmares haunt him? I've been out of contact with Ben for a couple of years now, but we all went to Air Force Tech School together. Ben was one of the sharpest analysts in our class, and humble, too. Straight-laced, he was someone I deeply trusted. Him, Katie, Kim, and I used to carpool to church on Sunday mornings, and we'd spend late nights in windowless buildings studying together. In the front row of the chapel sits Ben's wife, Katie. She holds a small baby to her chest, and a tiny toddler grabs her leg. Ben's face on the screen glares back. What happened? My chest trembles and tears pour out of my eyes. He's dead. Their daddy is dead. I should have called him. Maybe I could have helped. I had my own struggles. I could have told him he wasn't alone. Damn it. What happened? The pastor says words about Ben. His voice is soothing, and I know his words are true. Ben was one of the kindest souls I knew. Even with all the many unknowns surrounding Ben's suicide, he served our country with honor. Suicide could have hit any of us. The afternoon sun cascades through the blue, pink, purple, and gold panels, and a gentle melody plays on the piano. I don't want to leave this place. Nothing makes sense outside of these walls. The bloody battle of Mosul rages. My own nation feels torn apart. Phrases like Black Lives Matter, Christian nationalism, and MAGA buzz like a foreign language, and private email servers and great big walls are the chatter of conversations. Where do I fit into all of this? What the hell happened to my nation when I was gone? At this time, I'd like to invite friends and family to share words about Ben, the pastor says. Ben's brother comes to the mic. He glances at a wrinkled page of notes, then speaks directly to us. We always had a good time fishing and hunting. Sure gonna miss him. He tells us one story after the other, making us laugh and cry. In the front row, Ben's mom flushes from crying. Ben's dad wraps his arm around her, holding her closely. A mother shouldn't have to lose her son. He was too young. A soldier who hung himself in Iraq comes to mind, and I wonder how his mother received the news. Then I remember Brandon's MC-12 crash in Afghanistan, and my heart breaks for his mom. Ben's brother makes his final comments, choking up with his last words. He was a man of integrity and a man of courage. The chaplain thanks all of the friends and family for sharing, then pauses. At this time, please rise for the presentation of the colors. I rise to the position of attention, with eyes locked forward, with my arms pinned to my side and my feet at 45 degrees. I hear the color guard quietly giving commands. Both pride and pain run through my veins. This is my nation. Ben died for my nation. Color guard, forward, march. I snap my feet to face the American flag. Ben, Brandon, and the soldier from Iraq flash through my mind. It was all worth it, right? At the first bugle note of the national anthem, I salute the flag. My eyes still locked ahead, red, white, and blue blurred through my tears. Outside these walls, both friends and politicians slander one another, and accusations fly like incoming mortars. Yet, nothing can take my pride away from this flag. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay standing for the gun salute in honor of Benjamin Heine. The first shots reverberate through my bones. I'm reminded that I'm standing on American soil. The Battle of Mosul still rages in Iraq, but I'm here in this chapel. Ben, Brandon, and the soldier's death all at once. So much bloodshed. Their mothers, fathers, and sons will never see them again. I've poured my life out for this nation and given it all. Is it worth it? Clamoring voices rage outside these walls. Blood is shed for freedom, but deception and self-glorification rule in our leaders. Ben, Brandon, and the soldier are gone, and war still rages on. A battle still storms inside, and Afghanistan and Iraq will always roar. I glance again at the stained glass windows and find rest in the unknown. The creaky pews remind me I'm home, even if I'm wandering in my own nation.
That was November 8th, 2016, read by Laine Satterfield. Shani Miller, the author, is here with me in the studio. Shani, the story depicts you having been home for 2 months from what everybody acknowledges was, if not the worst, perhaps the second worst battle of Afghanistan behind Fallujah, Mosul. We'll get to your involvement in that battle in a moment. But you are at the service for a friend who had taken his own life. And I want to jump right to suicide could have hit any of us.
Yeah.
Two things about that. One, you treat suicide not like it's something that one does to oneself, but something that happens to someone.
Yeah.
And that everybody who was in the line of fire where we were is in the line of fire of suicide as well.
Yeah.
Take me through that.
Right around the time that Ben's suicide happened, I actually lost 3 total friends to suicide. And that, for me, was my first experience of what a lot of veterans called suicide season. That's a normal season for us where we lose friends at different points. And I think that was right around the time that would have been time for friends to process some things that happened. I think that it got too much for some of my friends. And just like many of my friends and myself, we worked in the intel world in a variety of different fields, whether it was drones or counter intel, all kinds of different things that we looked at. Those things take a toll, and we're just human. And depending on, who we are and how we process things, some of us just didn't make it.
It made you afraid for yourself. It must have. It would have me.
Oh, yeah. And I definitely had some pretty low points, both after my Afghanistan return in 2013 and then also from Iraq in 2016. There were a couple moments that were pretty close for me for taking my own life. I, just hit low points where the nightmares became too intense. I reached out to a couple of friends and they weren't necessarily present or aware of what was happening. I mean, after Afghanistan, I almost threw myself in front of a car. And at the last minute, I pulled out. And I think that I'm not alone, that there's probably most of my veteran friends have had those moments where it was like a 50% chance whether they were going to follow through with whatever the suicide ideations were.
You use a phrase in the story, kill chain.
Yeah.
Describe that.
Yeah, I think that the war is fought so much differently than wars before. When I struggled so much with PTSD, I didn't realize I had PTSD because PTSD to me was the guy that saw his friend blown up in front of him. My generation, we're experiencing war in different ways. We're involved in the war, but war is fought from a computer these days. And so the impact on us is different. And most of my friends struggle to even admit that we have PTSD because we didn't see the typical blown up in front of us. We can watch violence all day. We can be part of making those decisions that have a piece in war. But because we're not pulling a trigger from a M4, it's different. And so the kill chain is different in my generation.
When you say kill chain, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to the different decisions that are made in the fight in the war. There's all different decisions that are made.
And taking part in those decisions takes its toll,
Yes,
even though they may feel in the moment remote.
correct.
Given time, they amplify.
Right. And sometimes, when you're in a high ops environment, you're taking in things constantly and you're not as aware as if you would be in the field and you see something right in front of you, human bodies next to you. It's different when you're seeing things through a screen.
Sure. I want to shift away from the tragedy of that story to another tragedy. You've been home 2 months and you step right back into the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump election of 2016. And you called it quite accurately a crazy time. And you say, what the hell happened to my country while I was gone? And then you had this just beautiful image. You said, The red, white, and blue of the flag blurred through my tears.
Mm.
The question is, independent of current and future political trends, which just look like they're going to stay divisive for a while.
Yeah.
But my country, right or wrong, yeah? Is that where you came out? Because some people come out questioning, and those questions don't ever fade.
Sure.
But for you, with a beautiful family and a healthy life and a resurrection and return of your own stability
Yeah.
in this world and an abiding faith in God and Jesus,
Hmm.
things are good now, yeah?
Yeah, things are good. And I think that there's a gratitude and thankfulness that I've arrived at, even with my own nation. I've wrestled a lot, after returning from Mosul and my nation just being torn apart. I questioned my patriotism.
Mm.
But I think I've wrestled through that. And every time I look at the flag, there's this thankfulness that I have. I'm thankful that my kids can grow up in a place that they can learn to express who they are and value the freedom that many of my friends have fought for. There will always be, I think, a little bit of a wrestle when I see people fighting, and there are parts of other countries that I value and I love, more than my own nation.
Mm.
My husband and I have traveled a lot, and there are parts of Asia that we love deeply and wish that we had more of that here. The Middle East has given me things like honor and hospitality. My deployments gave me those experiences, and I'm glad that I can take those and express them here in our nation.
The last line of your beautiful story, I'm home, even if wandering in my own nation.
Mm,
Still there, it feels like, yeah?
yeah. Yeah. And I think having my kids has been such a healing journey for myself and just growing close to them and developing these core values in our family and teaching them the lessons that I've learned, the hard things and the beautiful things. We have a picture in our kitchen of me next to General Abbas, who is one of the generals that I worked with, one of the helicopter pilots. And then we have an American flag that's in a case next to it. And my kids are always, "Who is that?" General Abbas is, like, shorter than me, actually, and I tell them about him, he was brave, he was courageous, he's this man that taught me to make Middle Eastern food, and when I make Middle Eastern food with my kids, and I tell them stories about the beauty, and I think my military experiences give me those experiences to travel over there and be part of that.
All we can do is be good citizens and raise good citizens, yeah?
Yeah. There's so much brokenness in the world, there's pain, there's grief, and we can bring joy and goodness in our peace in our communities, and that's what I learned among my military comrades, and that's what I wanna do with my family, and that's what I wanna do in my nation.
Shani Miller, an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Yeah. The Mighty Pen Project is a free writing program for military veterans and their families, offered by the Virginia War Memorial Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. If you'd like to learn more about the Mighty Pen, or just send us your thoughts, email us at mppodcast@vawarmemorial.org or use the link in the podcast description. If you're a veteran or a family member of a serviceman or woman listening to this podcast anywhere in America, and you want to learn how to best write and tell your own powerful stories, you can sign up for one of our Mighty Pen writing workshops on Zoom. If you want to read today's pieces and many more, use the link to go to the Mighty Pen archive. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it. Music for this episode was provided by Jackson Albrecht. Lastly, if you'd like to support the Mighty Pen's efforts to record and preserve these stories of service, adventure, and sacrifice, follow the charitable donation link in the podcast description. I'm David L. Robbins, and I want to thank you for listening to the Mighty Pen Podcast. It's an honor.